Our next journey is going to take us to a very different part of the world. We're going to leave the Middle East, Southern Europe, Western Europe, and travel east. A long way east. Not only are we going to travel east, we are going to travel back in time 4,000 years. We are going to go back to a period 1,000 years before Moses sat down to write the book of Genesis. We're going to investigate some ancient hieroglyphs and religious concepts that were encrypted within them. We're going to travel back to civilization's longest running civilization that this world has, China. You see, the first Chinese dynasty, the Z dynasty, began just 50 years after the construction of the great ziggurat at Babylon, otherwise known as the Tower of Babel. Now, the ancient Chinese have a legendary period that speaks of the 50-year gap between the Tower of Babel, or the ziggurat of Babylon, and their first dynasty. A couple of the major characters within this time was a fellow by the name of Nuwa. Nuwa was the one who made the first altar for worship for the ancient Chinese, and he built it out of rainbow-coloured stones. Anybody here ever heard of somebody called Noah and his rainbow? Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Of course, Nuwa was related to Shen Nong. You know, Noah had a son named Shem. Shen Nong was, according to legend, the one who taught the ancient Chinese farming. Now, the fascinating thing about the ancient Chinese and their continuous civilization down to our time is that they had a written language from the very beginning. And as with many ancient written languages, it was a hieroglyphic language. A hieroglyphic language is a language where, rather than making characters that create sounds, you make characters that are pictures. And by combining different pictures or different radicals together, you form words. Now, the Chinese language has come down to us to this day with the radicals intact. Right back from the very ancient oracle bones. Here you have an oracle bone. Originally the Chinese wrote on bones, tortoise shells, and those kinds of things. Within the hieroglyphs of the Chinese language, the Chinese encrypted their spiritual heritage. I want to take a few moments to share something with you this evening. I find it most fascinating because this takes us way back, way further back than any of the ancient manuscripts that we've been talking about so far. Now, in Chinese hieroglyphs, because it's a hieroglyphic language and it's made up of pictures, there's no such thing as dyslexia. That's interesting. I have a son who's dyslexic, and sometimes I wish that we'd been born in China and I wouldn't have to worry about dyslexia. But then, on the other hand, when you come to think about the fact that there are 30,000 different characters in the Chinese alphabet, it starts to discourage you a little bit. But the good news is this. My good friend and associate, Terling Kwok, Chinese friend of mine from Sydney, direct descendant of the Qing dynasty, has maintained in her family a tremendous amount of the Chinese history that has been lost in communist China. Well, she informed me that the good news is that to have a working knowledge of Chinese, you only have to know about 8,000 characters. So that's a bit of a relief. Just to set you all at ease. Okay, let's have a look at some of these Chinese characters, shall we? Here we have a typical Chinese character. It's made up of a number of different radicals. Now, when you look at Chinese characters, the question you have to ask yourself is this. When they were originated, what was the person thinking when they came to put this word together? Why did they combine certain pictures to make a certain word? Let's have a look at some of the radicals that we have here. The first radical that we have is the radical for king. However, if you take the radical for king and add to it 2 ears, it changes. Now no longer does it mean king, now it means Lamb. The King who is the Lamb. Let's carry that a little bit further. We go down to the bottom and we have the radical for hand. This particular radical means my hand. And beside that, you place the radical for knife. Now, let's have a think about this for a moment. Some of you will probably twig to it straight away. Here you have my hand, a knife, a king who is a lamb. Why would all of those be put together? You see, the word is the Chinese word yi. It means righteousness. My hand that takes the knife to take the life of the Lamb who is the King. For those of you who are Christians, you will immediately recognize what that's all about, won't you? It's quite plain to the whole of Christianity right there. Not only that, it goes deeper than that. Because when you combine these two radicals here together, my hand and a knife, it means me or myself. The two radicals at the top combined together mean lamb. The lamb over me makes me righteous. That's a straight out Christian concept. Let's continue a little bit further. I'll show you a few more. There's some really fascinating ones here. Take, for example, this one right here. This is the word for a ship. A large, humongous ship. A couple of different radicals. The first radical is this one right here, the canoe. And you can see the two people sitting in the canoe with their paddle. A very small rowboat. Now, if you want to put together certain pictures to describe not a small rowboat, but a massive ship, what would you add to this particular radical right here? Well, it's quite simple. You add the number 8, and you add this symbol right here, which is the symbol of a mouth, square mouth. It can mean mouth, it can mean person. 8 persons on the boat make a massive ship. Where do you get that from? Yeah, that's Noah's Ark. Absolutely. 8 persons on the boat. Or you could put it this way. 8 mouths to feed on the boat. You see, Chinese count by mouths to feed. 8 mouths to feed on the boat. Okay, here comes this one's another fascinating one. This one I find quite astounding. First of all, you start with the hieroglyph for dust or dirt. Add to it the hieroglyph or the radical I should say, for breath. So now you've got dust plus breath equals, here comes that mouth again, the person, but not any kind of person, it equals a living person, because there you have a living person. You see how he's standing up on top of the land? So you've got the person, you get your person standing up here, and there's the land underneath. So that's a living person. So here's what you've got. Dust plus breath equals a living person. You know, I can read that to you from what Moses wrote 1,000 years later. Let me read it from here. Watch this. This is fascinating. The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, man became a living soul. We'll continue on. Look at this one. I love this one right here. Oh, there's lots of things in this one. The first radical at the top is a divine being from above who comes down as rain in the form of how many persons? 3 persons. Then you have the word for work, or the hieroglyph, or the radical for work. So when the divine being who comes down from above as rain in the form of 3 persons works, he creates 2 people, is the result. And the word is spirit. There's your word for spirit right there. You see it all just comes together. Okay, let's take it a little bit further. This one's a beauty. Take a look at this one for a moment. Now, in the Chinese hieroglyph, when they draw a tree, it's interesting how they do it. They don't draw a tree like I used to draw a tree when I was a kid. They draw the ground, and they draw the roots underneath, and then the tree above. So just so you know, that's a tree. In this one, there are two hieroglyphs. You start at the bottom with, or two radicals, the radical for God. However, you'll notice that this radical for God, or the divine being, is slightly different from the other one. And the difference adds into it the concept of reveal. So here, God is revealing something. You have the divine being revealing something through two trees. And the word, when you put it all together, is the word forbidden. God reveals what is forbidden through two trees. The tree of knowledge of life, the tree of life, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Want to see some more? Okay, let's see if we can put this one together. By the way, you will notice that all of these concepts originate from the portion of Genesis that is previous to the Tower of Babel, or the Great Babylonian Ziggurat, when the Chinese broke and moved away. They're all from that portion of Genesis that is previous to that point, all of these concepts. Okay, what have we got coming up here? Let's see. You have a hieroglyph for God in a slightly different format, because added to it is the radical for covering. Okay, so here you have God covering. All right, let's continue on with our radicals. And the next radical that we're going to look at is the radical for writing. God who comes down from above and covers us, directs us to something that is written, writing, language. So you have God placing his covering over those who understand the writing that is about the number 7. There's an interesting one. Once again, I can read that to you from Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 2, it says this. Genesis chapter 2, it says, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. By the way, this word right here means blessing. So you want to have a blessing? Then you need to have the divine being that comes from above, places covering over you, directs you to the writing about the number 7. Fascinating thing about the number 7. When you look at the world today, the year we calculate from the rotation of the earth around the sun, don't we? Okay? The month we calculate from the rotation of the moon around the earth. The day we calculate from the rotation of the earth itself. Where do we get the 7-day week from that you can find anywhere in the world, any culture in the world? Where does it originate? It only originates in one place. The Chinese have identified it right there. It originates in the book of Genesis. Okay, next one. Let's see. What have we got here? Actually, I gave you the wrong word for the last one. The last one wasn't blessing, it was devout. It was devout. So a devout person is one who the divine being above places covering over, understands the writing about number 7. This is the one for blessing. Do apologise. My Chinese is a little bit scratchy. I'm learning. Okay, here we come with blessing. How do you get blessing? You have another radical here for God, which is a slight variation on the other radical for God that we've looked at before. You have the radical for 1. You have the radical for, we've all seen this one a few times, haven't we? The mouth, the square, or the person. And then you have this one right here, which is a garden with 4 rivers in it. God gives one man a garden with 4 rivers in it. Who was that? What was the garden that had 4 rivers in it? Garden of Eden. That's right. Some of you here, Bible students, would know that. Garden of Eden there, right there. The word blessing. God gives one man a garden with 4 rivers in it. His blessing. And one final one. We begin with a radical for a tree, one tree. One tree combined with a mouth. Seen it once, seen it a few times already. The word here is the word refrain. Refrain your mouth from the fruit of one tree. Oh, we could go on and on and on. My friend Thurling, she showed me heaps of these things. She just writes them all down and says, okay, yeah, this works like this and like this and like this. And oh, it makes my mind spin when I see it all. Friends, the thing that gives me the chills when I look at something like this is that this religious heritage was encrypted in the ancient Chinese hieroglyphs over 1,000 years before the book of Genesis was written. Isn't that amazing? It's incredible the things that we can find when we look into the ancient codes and manuscripts and documents of the past. However, we need to finish up. I've run out of time. So, tomorrow night, don't come here. We don't have a lecture. There won't be anybody here. You will be here on your own tomorrow night. So when do you need to come back for the next one? Friday is the next one. Next Friday we start back up again. Our subject is the Christ man and the pagan cross. Anybody notice the similarities between those two crosses right there? We're going to look into the history, the variations of the cross, where it originated from, what it means, why it became a Christian symbol. We're going to look at some of the most ancient artwork in the world. We're going to look at the concept of human sacrifices, where they originated, how they took place, who was involved in them. We're going to look at, one of the things in particular that we're going to look at is ancient Rome. Now, ancient Rome, out of all of the global civilizations, we can learn more from ancient Rome about our time right now than any other civilization. Certainly, the Egyptians are fascinating to study, but that's because we haven't started on the Romans yet. You wait until we get into the Romans. Some of the other things that we're going to look into. Who were the Magi? Where did they come from? What was the knowledge that they had? I don't know about you, but I would not gather my wealth together, trek for hundreds of miles in primitive conditions, just because I saw a star in the sky that I didn't recognise. There's a whole lot more to that story yet to be found out. Those are some of the things that we're going to dig into next week. Look forward to seeing you all then. It's been great to be with you all.